All right, thank you, Joe. Can everyone see the presentation that's coming through? I assume.
Yes, we can.
All right, thanks. Well, I'm Stan Smith with USGS, and I work in the Alaska Science Center, and background in math, physics, and chemistry got me here and got me into computers, and I spent most of my life working in with software development and into database design and so on, and serve as the USGS Senior Bureau Data Modeler and the data manager for the Alaska Science Center. So what is this ADIwg thing? And I'm sure that most of you have never heard of it, so I'll spend just a few minutes on ADIwg, the Alaska Data Integration Working Group. It was put together very late 2009. We probably had our first meetings really kicking off in early 2010. And it was assembled by the Alaska Climate Change Executive Roundtable, which consisted of all of the regional executives in Alaska for the different bureaus and state agencies that were involved in climate change as a means of sharing resources, really, not just financial resources, but maybe somebody has a boat sitting up on the Yukon River or someplace that another agency might need to borrow to get up and down the river, to do research. Because Alaska is such a difficult place to work in, and resources are short. So these are the agencies that are in ADIwg and work in ADIwg, and each of these organizations has a member on the ADIwg team. So just a bit of background that we were given, well, 3 phases of work to right there at the beginning, and our first phase was to work with project metadata. And so the group was figuring out how we're going to exchange information about our projects within our organizations. And if I see what happens if I try to jump out of this, I don't know what will. Let me try it a different way, maybe. And so this is the installation site that Alaska put up. These are our projects. Now, if I pick on any project, get a little pop-up. And it comes out to, we have online generation of metadata records, say project metadata. You click a button, you get project metadata for any project. The idea was, so the technical group really worked on coming up with a project metadata standard, which was based on FGDC at the time, which was fairly flexible. And then each of the organizations was responsible for that implementation in their own organization, which we just showed you what USGS did. And phase 2 was to do that same sort of thing with data metadata, but we ended up adopting ISO standard 19115-2, and that has a very high level of investment, both in terms of comprehending it, which takes at least 3 months of very serious thinking about it to get your head wrapped around it. And most of the organizations in ADIwg are small enough that they could not implement on their own. So that meant that we had to build some sort of a tool set that would meet the diverse requirements and implementation skills across our membership. And then one last thing that we decided we wanted to do was then include our project metadata standard, move that to ISO at the same time. That was largely from other international organizations who were looking at our project standard and wanting to get it away from FGDC. So we set our objectives to sort of eliminate the whole necessity to even having to learn ISO and ISO standards. And the standard truly is not one standard, but it's a family of standards. And we did achieve that. Using these tools, you really don't need to know ISO. Of course, you need to know other things. So but things that are easier help. So we want to make it easy for organizations to achieve that ISO compliance, to be able to integrate that support into their local applications and services, and be able to build web services that have ISO capabilities. So we wanted to put all those tools in front of people. And we also wanted to host a public web service for the generation of ISO metadata, and we have that. That's out. And support both project metadata, data metadata. That we did. And then we also want to host a public web application for PI scientists to enter and edit their metadata records. And that is in the works right now. That's the one piece of the whole toolkit that's not ready yet. And in the spirit of cooperation, if anybody wants to help on that, I'm all ears. Okay, but I want to spend just a minute here, maybe less, on what's in scope and out of scope, because when we talk about this, people assume things, we're doing things we're not, so on. What we're talking about is creation of original metadata and dropping down to not. So we're not doing clearinghouses or storing metadata, stores of metadata records. We're not searching through existing metadata records or translating between standards. We're creating original metadata records. We're making all of our code open source and in available libraries wrapped up in different ways to make it usable. We're talking about user-friendly metadata preparation tools, and we want to be able to meet the diverse needs of all kinds of organizations, from large to small, and make it also extensible. And that new metadata standards can be added as we go along. So in practice, if we look at it this way, we have this thing we call our translator, which accepts, you have to write metadata somehow. You need the content. And, well, I'll show you a little piece of that here in just a minute, but that's what we say, this mdJson. That's one of our little trademarks. That's just for metadata JSON in a JSON format. So if you're out there in the web and you create this metadata JSON file, you can feed it to the translator and you can get back ISO XML. And that's the first round trip that we made and wanted to make. The second way we envision the tools being used is that we've packaged that translator so that it can be added into your own agency's software system and run on your own server. And that's the way we'll do this here at USGS and some of the other larger agencies. So our metadata will be actually in a database. A database can generate the metadata JSON file and stick that into the translator. We can spit out ISO on the other end, just like we demonstrated with the project metadata to the older standard. So no metadata is stored in that sense. Everything is live and fresh. All the metadata records that get generated are current. And in the third sort of installation package, we want to be able to add that editing service in front, so people that don't have ability to generate that JSON metadata file on their own can go to a web service that's out there and enter their metadata and have that created, ship it over, and bring that back. So the toolkit right now consists of these four. There's actually a fifth component I'll show you in a second. That, which is the mdJson, which is a standard for encoding project and data metadata. A translator, which is the piece that actually does that translation of metadata, mdJson to some ISO standard. And a tool, mdTools, which is a sort of a dashboard for our documentation, our validation scenarios, and accessing a translator. And then eventually we will bring in the MD editor, which is the online preparation and editing of mdJson files. So when we talk about the mdJson schema, we have the schema in JSON for all the non-techies. I can make that more confusing and tell you that that's JavaScript object notation. But the important thing about that is it's much, much simpler and forgiving than XML. It's also native to all web browsers. It's the way the web ships data around natively. So almost all the languages will run on the web, interface with it very well. And it's easy to read by humans. And you can see the first part of our standard that's up here. The standard that we do have, the schema we have, supports both project and data metadata, and we can generate at this time. It also supports the 19115-2, 19110, and FGDC standards. The translator here is, the architecture is important because this is what allows us to support different kinds of writers, where the simple mdJson file is read in, it comes into a validator. If it passes the validator, it goes to its reader, which places it into this internal format. And from that internal format, then we can generate output in any of these standards. We're doing the first two right now, 19115-2 and 110, our HTML writer, which would be a human sort of paper, something you can turn into a PDF, say, for looking at your metadata. That will be out pretty quickly. The bottom one there, 19115-1, which is the 2014 version of ISO geospatial metadata. We're waiting for NOAA to publish their XSDs, which is their schema design and validators, so that we can write that part, but we've made promises to do that. I think I'm running out of time, so I won't show as much of that, but maybe we get there. The tools, which I will show you this one, has three parts to it right now. The schema view, recall, which is interactive documentation for mdJson schema. So if you're wondering what that schema is, how do I create it, you would go to this page, and it has the documentation for doing that. It has a validator, so that after you create your file, you can drop it into the validator. It'll tell you where any problems are in that file. And then the third page it allows you to submit that file and get back. The editor is not ready yet, but we will develop that to be completely a client-side application. So it would be hosted, so you would download the web page, but it runs on the client side. All your editing is done on the client side, and all the files that you created would be stored locally. And that we hope is coming soon, but we got work to do there. All of our code is open source, hosted on GitHub, and we're writing all of our documentation to this new GitHub facility called GetBook, which allows it to be viewed online. You can also download it for the Kindle or get a PDF version to take offline or take online, and we will have that probably up in a month or two. So that brings to the end of that, but I'll show you just a couple of pieces of that, of what we have. So we went, where did we go from there? There to there. All right, these are, if you went out to our GitHub page, these are all the repositories. You can see books and tools and a Rails implementation, which is just a web service for it, codes, schemas, so all translators. So all the code is out there. People can can access it, download it, work with it, help us, which is cool. This is the online schema viewer, which it starts at the top of the schema. If you click on, might take a second here. Maybe there we go. Had to wake it up again. We're using free hosting services, so we don't touch things. They tend to swap out. Might have to wait a second sometimes. But for anything that I grab on here, if I click on it, it'll move to the center. If you get a green spot, you can open up and see if there are other attributes below it. So you can keep working your way down. Also, anything that you grab a hold of, you can see over here under definitions. We have definitions for each of these attributes. We have how they translate to ISO and to FGDC. If you go over here, click on example, you'll see how that fits into how you would build, what it would look like. And if you're really a nerd, you might want to look at the schema, how it's validated in the schema. That's the first part of it. Then you can take it to the validation section. If I dropped it in here, which I don't have time to do all that, I can load the example, and I could set some options I want it. Click on validate, and it would validate. Or when I get it all done, I can drop it into the translator and set my options and get a validation. We also have a web page up that has, and this is another one that probably timed out on me. Have to wait a second. Someday we'll pay for a server, I guess.
and
when we get some money.
You could wrap it up. We can move on in terms of the next activity.
All right. I'll just show you just one thing more and then leave it. I know this is kind of long, but so there's also a demo page, and I won't change any of the options, but you can see you have your JSON file, and if I click submit, you get back your ISO infinitely long metadata record generated from that. Way too much to handle. All right, I'll leave it at that.
Excellent. Thank you, Stan. And I guess in terms of the interest of time, I know you folks are usually running tight on that as well. But one of the things that I'd like to suggest is that, obviously there's a lot here. So in the near future, maybe we'll offer a webinar primer on the tool. And that might be something that you can invite some other folks, make sure they attend that may not regularly attend the meetings, and might be very helpful. So we'll talk with Stan and see if he's willing to do that.
That could work.
Thank you, Stan, very much. And I wonder, with respect to everyone's time, is it possible that everyone can hang in there for another 15 minutes?
Yes.
Jessica, I'm actually recording these, so if people need to go, I can make the presentations available later.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that. Normally I'll run these pretty much on time. Since it's our first one, it's running a little bit behind. But having said that, I'd like to get Peter Palsova from NSIDC. He's agreed to provide us a short presentation about if you would, a data coordination networking kind of approach, and I thought that might be a very good thing to leave off relative to the presentation. So, Peter, if you would, please, sir, and take about 10 to 15 minutes, if you could, Peter.
Certainly. Thank you, Joe, and thanks all for making it to this call. I'm just going to give you a pretty high-level overview of some of the international data coordination activity I've been involved in, and at least one other person, Bill Manley, on the call has also been involved in. Sorry, just trying to get my screen to switch. There we go. So for any of you who've been around a little while, I think you're aware that there's a lot been going on over the last decade in particular, and particularly over the International Polar Year in the way of data management. There's been a number of formal and informal networks that have been established, some that formed for the IPY and have since disappeared, and others that have sustained over time. During that period of the IPY and after, we also saw a number of different workshops and major events. So a few of them are listed here. A workshop in Yellowknife in 2007, meetings for the IPY in Oslo, Montreal. The Project ADIwg had a major workshop in 2011. And then a really, I think, major event for the international community was the Polar Data Forum held in Tokyo in October of 2013. So a lot has been happening on the international front. Most of those initiatives have some sort of output in the form of reports, et cetera. I won't go into them here, but they're out there and can be read. So one of the things that I think we've recognized in this coordination effort or this initiative that we're working on is that there's a lot out there. We know a lot already. So certainly we can always learn more, but we really need to start building on what we've established in terms of the needs and the requirements and what we need to do to move forward in the area of data management. A group of us got together on that front and put together a paper that was published last year. This actually came out of the Polar Data Forum in 2013, but was published late last year, just talking about putting together an international polar data coordination network. And the paper talks at a fairly abstract level, but really looks at the idea of building on networks and network science to try and understand how we can really make one of these networks work. It's a real challenge. Like ADIwg, at least the networking activity is budget neutral. We don't have large amounts of funds. People are coming on their own dime, so to speak. And we need to figure out a way to sort of move us forward in terms of collaboration and sharing. So we put together some ideas about, how we would build a network based on existing resources, based on initiatives that are out there and linking those together and how to facilitate that. So one of the things that we certainly want to do is recognize what is already there. And so you'll see a number of nodes in this network, including the science agencies, the existing Standing Committee on Antarctic Data Management that's been around for many years, Research Data Alliance, et cetera. In concert with, the activity that's been going on in the data management community, there's also been a lot of activity within the broader science community. And so you start to see major organizations like IASC, for example, recognizing the importance of data management and sound data management for science. So in April of 2013, they released a statement of principles and practice for Arctic data management. So a group of us worked together on that for about 6 months and published it. And one of the recommendations was to establish a data standing committee for the Arctic, the same way that there is one established for the Antarctic, to try and actually do some coordination. There's just a URL down there with the info if you want to reference that. So this committee was actually formed in November of 2014. It actually started out as 2 committees, the IASC Data Committee and the SAON Data Committee. And we all agreed when we met that there was no need to have multiple data committees that often with the same people on the committee. So that has been merged into simply the Arctic Data Committee. During the meeting in Potsdam in November, we had a lot of discussion about what the priorities of the committee should be. We all agreed that we really want to build on existing resources and facilitate the success of effective existing programs rather than trying to start up some new program or new initiative. And so part of that is first, as has happened, I think, in a number of IARPIC groups, is to take a bit of an inventory and understand the Arctic data management ecosystem. And so we started that at the workshop, and that's an ongoing effort to try and identify at least the major nodes in the network, or what I'd actually call the hubs in the network. that will help us to then link to individual initiatives. Another issue that came up, and actually Stan's talk really pointed this idea of metadata and metadata elements. And so in this case, we don't have the mandate to try and standardize metadata around the globe for polar science, but the idea is to look at what's happening, and very specifically, for example, we have a telecon planned for next week with some folks from the ADIwg group to talk about how that work can be leveraged. There's some work going on with Polar Data Catalog in Canada, Norway, Japan, et cetera. So what we're trying to do is see what's already happening and see how we can keep that moving. We also know there's a lot going on with respect to data citation and publication. So in that regard, we're simply putting together a brief statement that will point polar scientists to information about that. There's a lot of good stuff out there already through RDA and a number of other groups, ESIP, et cetera. And lastly, what we want to do as we move forward, and this is a bit of a medium to long-term goal, which is an interoperability experiment. And so knowing that a number of different data centers and organizations are publishing data through web services and newer models of data publication, how can we bring that together into an application that serves science and society? So in that regard, we are not doing this on our own. We're actually partnering with the SEON Sister Committee, which is the Committee on Observing Networks, who are then partnering with a number of other groups, national and international groups. So looking to them for guidance on what kind of questions and issues that we need to address with this experiment, rather than just have it be a technical activity. So that is all starting to move forward. We're going to be doing our first reporting at Arctic Science Summit Week in Toyama at the end of April. Another big initiative that's not strictly an Arctic Data Committee initiative, but is part of this overall push, is a follow-on to the first Polar Data Forum in Tokyo. Myself and Ellsworth LeDrew from Polar Data Catalog in Canada are co-chairing, along with Julie Friedel. And that has now been confirmed for the week of the 27th to 29th of October. So we will have a 2.5-day forum, along with the business meetings of both SCADM, these Antarctic folks, and the Arctic Data Committee. So we're looking at it as a Polar Data Week. And you'll see more about that in the coming weeks and months. And Marco can't be here, but thanks to him, he has helped to support the effort in terms of moving it forward with some small funding. So really, why I'm interested in discussing with this group, or presenting to this group, follows on a conversation I had with Joe and some others a couple of weeks back, where I shared some of this information, and we talked about the role of IARPC and ADCT. And so we know in the U.S., like some other countries, we have a lot going on. It's a distributed system with dedicated data centers. Under NSF, we have many. So data management plans are now the norm, so we're seeing a lot more in the way of data management. We have the A2DC that was mentioned earlier, this Research Coordination Network, ACADIS, PGC, LOCA, RMAP, and a number of others that are NSF funded. Of course, we have the NASA DAX, NOAA, all kinds of different things going on. So, the U.S. is its own complex data ecosystem. And so where I talked to Joe, or what I talked to Joe about, was, can we start to see a group like the IARPC ADCT as one of these hubs or initiatives that can at least link these different projects across agencies and across, research institutions, et cetera, so that then can be connected to a larger international effort. And that's where I think in the future weeks, months, and years, I'd like to try and see where do, the U.S. hubs and nodes fit within this broader international picture. And I think we're making a lot of good progress in a relatively short amount of time. And I'd certainly like to engage this group as we move forward at the international level. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate that. Any quick questions for Peter relative to that? Excellent. Thanks, Peter. I really appreciate that. We're going to hear a lot more about that. I'm looking forward to engaging with you on the team. I think some of your thoughts and some of the work you're doing has great promise in terms of answering some of the outcomes that this particular collaboration team is looking for. So thank you again.